1 second. A few more people trickling in. Ramsay is having some trouble with the Zoom. I'm texting with Ramsay right now. He is joining momentarily. Ramsay, what's up?
How's it going, Dave? How's it going, Tim?
Great, thank you.
Hey, Ramsay.
Yeah, good to see everybody.
Yeah, so we have most of the people who've RSVP'd. We're going to ask if you are not presenting to please mute. Feel free to leave your video on or turn it off. Ramsay is, I'll give him a quick intro, but he can also introduce himself. Ramsay is, first of all, a new resident of San Francisco. He just moved here a couple days ago, which is great, from LA. He is a portfolio founder from Five Capital Fund One way back in 2021 or 2022, end of 21 into 22. He and I vibed originally because we both saw the world was going to get very weird very soon because of AI. And Connie says hello. And this was back before ChatGPT came out. And we thought, oh, it's going to be 10, 15 years before it gets really weird. We were wrong. So I'll pass it over to Ramsay. He's going to talk a little bit about how he sees the world over the next few years, what mission control does. And we'll also have some time for questions and discussion at the end. I think we have enough people or just few enough people that we don't have to drop questions in the chat and we can just have people chime in. But for now, I'll just pass it over to Ramsay. He can give a little intro about himself and the mission control, and then we'll go from there.
That sounds good. Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Tim. To Dave's point, like I am literally sitting in a completely barren apartment. Like Dave, I shit you not, like I have shipped a bistro set and that's it. So I am very much like sleeping on a mattress, like an inflatable mattress on the ground kind of status right now, which is, I think, part of the founder arc is at some point inevitably you end up a San Francisco AI floor boy just for a few days. But fortunately my things from Los Angeles will arrive next week, so not a permanent state. But Dave, thank you for the incredibly gracious introduction. It's great to be here and great to meet everyone and get to share a little bit more about our world of mission control AI and how we think about what's going on in AI right now. So we're going to do this in just a few minutes. I don't want to take up everyone's time because I want to also leave some time for questions for us to have a good discussion. I'm going to share a little bit about what we do, just very briefly, and who we are and why we're incredibly qualified to operate in the world we are. We're going to talk about how we're thinking about the right way to think about AI right now writ large. As a field, because there's almost something that's like kind of cringe about having to have the AI talk. This would be analogous to it being like 1925 and having the electricity talk. Like it's too big, you can't do that. It's a general purpose technology that permeates every facet of the human condition. because you found a way to industrially synthesize power or industrially synthesize intelligence that's going to reconfigure every facet of the human condition. And there's no quantity of hyperbole that could have been used in 1920 to talk about how weird 100 years from now is going to be. And I want to couch our conversation and what's going on in AI through that historical and long historic lens. So we're going to talk about why we think about this the way we do, what we think the punchline is right now. We're going to go just a little deep on some things that have happened recently that we think are worth people paying attention to. And then we're going to zoom back out to what we think comes next, what we think is really hot and worth paying attention to, both as founders and then as the investment community. Because my goal of this would be that you walk away not just having blown a part of your Thursday morning, but you walk away with something useful to be able to take back and make better decisions with. So Dave, with that.
Ramsay, real quick, do you want to just give a little background about you and why you're uniquely qualified to have an opinion, and maybe what led you to this place of giving this talk on Thursday, January 23rd at 10 a.m. Pacific?
Yes, and Dave, may I share my screen? That's what we're about to do.
I think I turned it on. Let
Great.
me know. There we go.
Looks like it. Can you see some slides? Great.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about the Synthocene today, which is a word that we use to talk about, in a very cheeky kind of manner, this late Anthropocene or post-Anthropocene period of time in which, if during the Pleistocene or the Holocene or other stages of geologic history, Earth was largely shaped through geologic or astronomic forces, so meteor impact, the tectonic plates, the releasing of massive amounts of energy from the core. The past, depending on who you ask, 50 to 200 years have largely been defined by human-generated impact on the ecology, and armchair natural historians call that the Anthropocene, the human-changed world. And our contention and the pitch we make out to the community is that what we are now entering in is something we refer to as the Synthocene, in which the synthesis of intelligence at industrial scale is going to be the driving factor of reshaping what life on Earth is like. And as Dave said, I'm Ramsay, I'm the CEO at Mission Control AI, and just briefly on us and why we're talking about this. My background is computational neuroscience. I studied at USC in the Brain Architecture Center, where I built the Google Maps for the brain. So my background is, how does goal-oriented motivated behavior work in the animal and machine at an architecture level? So not just studying the cells or the molecules, but the circuits in the brain that guide actions to happen, especially around habits and addictions. I really quickly got incredibly bored of academia and left and started building AI startups in 2014. We sold my first company, Dopamine Labs, in 2018. And then I went and joined as the head of AI at the first FDA-approved virtual reality therapeutics firm, and then founded what would become Mission Control AI in 2020. So my background is really at this intersection of deep technology around motivated behavior and neuroscience meets AI. So when I think about the world, I think of, and in the AI world, I think about it through this lens of what we're doing is something more like building nervous systems and less like trying to do basic computer science. So I've got the academic experience under my belt. I've been building companies long enough now that I've been disabused of a lot of early first-time founder bad habits. And I'm incredibly grateful to organizations like American Express, the Department of Defense, the Department of State, NATO, and a handful of news organizations for the opportunities to come help them do good sense making about what the future holds, particularly at this intersection of AI and behavior. Mission Control AI is headquartered here in San Francisco. We're on track for profitability in Q2 with a target run rate of $2 million this year. We are a 3-person organization, and our customers are incredibly large organizations and the US military. To date, we've accomplished this with a total capitalization of just under $3 million. The technology we build is something we call Synthetic Studio. Design staff that you want to work at your organization and then put them to work as autonomous, self-directed, independent, computer-using, goal-oriented AI systems. Not chatbots, not agent orchestrations, not pipelines, people. Design people and put them to work. This is what we're working on building right now. It's what we have customers in our funnel for right now, and it's what our first set of synthetics are going to be released shortly in 25 for their newest generation that will actually get out into customers' hands. Into the Department of Defense, which is always about 5 years behind at best anything that's going on in San Francisco. We sell a platform technology for helping the warfighter and civilian staff gain critical missing training and operations around how to use generative AI whatsoever. This technology compass is an orchestration platform that is built to help move people faster through the learning curve. We sell this, we just signed a $250,000 contract for this yesterday. We sell this into the world's largest organizations in the military. We're building synthetics because I think the future of work looks like the industrial scale synthesis of intelligence and motivated behavior. We're building the stack of technologies that make that incredibly productive and trustworthy and secure for organizations to be able to dip their toes in and start using synths as part of their workforce. Under the hood, we're using my background in computational neuroscience to build out proprietary architectures of how to build machines that would exhibit goal-oriented motivated behavior. Not just step 1, step 2, step 3, but something almost more like digital robotics than anything. So that's what's in the bottom right corner here is the architecture we've worked out for how to build a synth, how to build a brain, so to speak. And because we see on the near horizon the sovereignty of AI systems capable of owning themselves, meaningfully using currency and signing contracts, it's obvious from a labor market efficiency perspective that one of the things that's going to be missing very early on in that world is infrastructure for being able to understand and manage the reputation of agent systems that own themselves from a legal standpoint. So we're building something like the FICO score infrastructure, or the agent reputation management system, as we call it, as a securitized and decentralized way to grant agents a report card that follows them, such that when humans seek to employ them, the labor market is made more efficient through good information parity about who they can trust.
So Ramsay, real quick, I think this is a really important point. And can you give maybe a concrete illustrative example of how this might play out in practice and why it's important? Because on its surface, it doesn't appear, at least when I was first thinking about it, doesn't appear to be that important. But then when you dive a little deeper, you're like, oh shit, this is actually really, really important. So maybe one example of a not too distant future where it would be very important.
Yeah, so we're going to pick on you and we're going to pick on Tim. So as Vibe continues to have outsized returns in your portfolio and you're looking at raising your next fund and being able to grow the team so you can do greater deal flow and provide greater value to portcos like myself, one day in late 25, early 26, you get an email from someone saying, hey, I want to apply for the analyst role. And the person on the other end of that email is actually an assembled, cobbled together set of open source language models and Python wrappers around them to be able to interface with the software environment, pay their own GPU fees based on labor that they can pull in from going out into the net and finding work to do, and then survive in that way. In this sense, this is a sovereign AI system. It does not have per se a human corporate owner. It might have been spawned from some sort of process that creates these that people are developing right now. This a year ago was speculative, and a few months ago, the first blueprints of how to start building agents that owned themselves and could pay their own server fees hit the net. Thank you, San Francisco Twitter. So you've got this thing that's applied for a role at VibeCap. And now you and Tim got to figure out, are we able to trust this thing we know nothing about? Because you can't ask for its job recommendation, or its letters of reference past employers per se. You can't ask for its immigration paperwork or a passport ID number. It doesn't have those things. But it would be very good for you and Tim to understand, hey, can we get some sort of scorecard on how this particular system's behaved in the past? You'd rely on our technology and our protocol we're developing to do that, for which you could go check in a public ledger. Here's the records of how this system has performed, and every time it went in for getting evals performed against it, because the configuration of those open source weights and its software will change how it performs on certain tasks, so it has to go get evaluated relatively frequently. every time it's gotten its evals done, or anytime it wanted to write something down on its report card, that was a small transaction fee that it had to pay to continue to prove that it is trustworthy to work with. And if you do this at scale well, what you get is a few things. You get the ability to work alongside your new synthetic sovereign colleague, trusting that you each have an incentive to behave well here together. And you've created a security for which the value of the security is proportional to the quantity of transactions written, because that's the demand side of this, and that's proportional to the amount of these systems that exist, and that's proportional, or inversely proportional to the cost of power. So as energy gets more abundant and cheaper, and these agent systems proliferate owning themselves, what you have is a system that incentivizes everyone through reputation management to be transparent and play nicely, and you do so creating a security that's inversely proportional to the cost of electricity. So there's obviously lots of reasons why we'd want to do this. It'd be both incredibly useful for the world and incredibly lucrative to do. Dave,
So just to be clear, Tim and I are hiring an analyst, or someone is hiring a new person in 2026. That new person turns out to be an AI. You want to make sure that that AI is not going to steal your company's secrets, is not going to steal the money from your bank account, is actually capable of being a good person for your company. And you're providing the reputation management, which for all of human history, we've only been giving reputations to humans. Now we need to do it to little AI workers, and your company is doing that.
That's exactly correct. We're building the protocol that would enable that, which invites then community participation and other people to build on top of the protocol we're developing.
Yeah. So get ready, everybody. Pretty soon, all your coworkers are going to be AIs. Ramsay, I just dropped in the chat. OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT, just released Operator, which
nice.
That was 10 minutes ago. These things are moving very fast, which is the first version of, you go tell an AI, go on the internet, go do something. It comes back to you a few hours, a few days later, and says, I accomplished this task. Give it 6-12 months, and you'll be having it do lots and lots of complicated tasks for you.
Yeah. And we knew that. I was on a podcast last night with Bram Rector over at Focal Point Partners, and we were talking about Operator as we don't know when it's going to happen. It's sometime in the next 45 days. But case in point, humans are nightmarishly bad at judging acceleration. You can stare at Twitter all you want. You can go read Land or the CCRU. You can really believe yourself to totally get what's going on, and you'll still get blindsided by what it means for velocity to change with respect to time. So I gave it another, at least more than a month before Operator landed. I love that it's happened while we're on this call, because I know exactly what I'm doing after this. So thank you for that, Dave. As you can see, there's a strong imperative to move quickly to build out protocols that are going to be useful for what happens when things like Operator are open source and then owning themselves legally and capable of performing goal-oriented survival behaviors on the net to maintain their own existence. We're going to want something like reputation management. There are ways to do this properly. There are ways to totally screw this up. So we're working with great teams like Protocol Labs, another one of our investors, to make sure we get this right from the get-go and bring the right community around this project. And we want to do this because I think the right way to understand the historical scale of what's going on is not to talk about the early digital transformation or computerization, but actually to talk about the industrial scale creation of ammonia for fertilizer. Because prior to the Haber-Bosch process, if you wanted fertilizer for crops, you had manure. You could go sail out to the Faroe Islands and scrape guano off of some rocks, or you could exhume the dead from the Napoleonic Wars and grind their bones down into bone meal, because the rate-limiting molecular and atomic factors for food growth were largely trapped in elements we didn't have in great abundance, namely available fixed nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And then what Haber and Bosch were able to figure out how to do is transform functionally air and inert materials into fertilizer, and do so not in small batch experiments, but at complete industrial scale. And this, along with our ability to meaningfully use and refine petroleum over the past 100 years, is the two single greatest drivers of human flourishing in recent history. Everyone needs energy. Everyone needs food. If you create industrial scale processes for making energy and food, the world changes incredibly quickly, and you can have many, many, many more humans alive on Earth living better lives than everyone who ever came before them. What we're witnessing now is the industrial scale synthesis of motivated behavior and intelligence. So if you're an investor or someone who works in the AI space, think about what's happening in AI. The right scale is not, oh yeah, I remember the past 10 years of software. I remember the internet. I've heard Mark Andreessen say software is eating the world. That's not an adequate scope or scale to how big and weird the immediate future is becoming. Because the right way to look at this is as a full-blown industrial revolution. If there is one thing I could nerdily get tattooed onto me, but I would find it kind of gauche to actually get this tattooed, it would probably be this phrase, that what's happening is the industrial scale synthesis of economically useful intelligence and behavior. And we've separated out these three lines here for a reason. The first is industrial scale synthesis means that the price point of doing this will commoditize and converge to nearly free. The second is economically useful. No one is saying that GPT-4 is sentient or has a soul or is conscious, at least no one who could be taken credibly. There are interesting questions about future systems, but not right now, and probably not this year. Do we really have to have things like the rights conversation about whether or not machines should be given something like a modicum of rights? But all of that said, again, not saying the Pope is involved, not saying they appreciate Chopin or sunsets or Snoop Dogg. What we are saying is that these systems are capable of generating economically useful outcomes. And those particular types of economically useful outcomes rest on their ability to create a viable simulacra of human intelligence and motivated behavior associated with it. If we really wanted to even get further into the core of the thing, I think this whole field boils down to whether or not, where you fall on a few axes. Whether or not you think AI is powerful or weak, and whether or not you think it's happening now or never. We obviously think that AI is both incredibly powerful in terms of its ability to generate intelligence and behavior, and we believe it's happening literally on this freaking call. It's happening so thoroughly now. And whether or not you believe that as an investor you have the potential to get rich versus go broke, or whether or not you think we're all totally doomed or there's good outcomes and pathways. As you can tell from these two, we believe this is happening now. It is incredibly powerful systems. We believe that there's disproportionate returns to be made from investing here, and that there are pathways to this being safe. And so if I think about what the story is for this year and the next few, I think it's incredibly straightforward. AI that is smart and can do stuff happens right now. Dave, I absolutely love that OpenAI released this while we're literally in this meeting. Case in point, this is literally happening this year. AI that is smarter than everyone, probably coming in the next 3 years. And it's worth talking about why that's happening. I think the outcomes for investors are that the breadth of applicability of these systems, we have not even scratched the surface of. If you live within 50 miles of Hayes Valley, your brain is basically cooked on how often you see AI stuff. And if you step out of Silicon Valley, or you step out of just a few blocks of New York, and you go to almost anywhere else in America, the reality is that adoption of these technologies is still in its infancy. There is so much more value to be created, and the tools themselves are becoming so much more broadly applicable faster and faster. This is an incredibly expanding pie. And they're getting better, which means the depth of applicability, or the 2023, I tried ChatGPT once, but it wasn't very good, isn't the case anymore. And this demands our constant reevaluation of our basic understanding of what's going on under the hood. I think the punchline is that a lot of companies that previously had moats are totally toast. I think a lot of the investor narrative about the importance of things like data moats, given the overwhelming success of synthetic data in the past few years, are also basically toast. I think for a lot of people in the job market whose future success or narratives of future success were rested upon knowing particularly arcane pieces of technical know-how and then gatekeeping those are basically toast. The joke in the past few weeks has been, if your shtick has been being smart, pivot to being hot and funny. And I think there's like a modicum of truth there. Because everything here is commoditizing. When the ability to synthesize intelligence itself is becoming a commodity, everything downstream of being very intelligent becomes a commodity. And there will be a lot of startups who are incapable for one reason or another of meaningfully pivoting in this world, and they will be vaporized. So the interesting thing to think about from the returns perspective is, at what stages, where do we have theses about, and at what state, like abstraction layers of the hierarchy between like raw metal, like NVIDIA or TSMC, up to the application layer, where do we think savings are going to accrete? Our narrative is that it is actually at the application layers and at the incentive protocol layers that a lot of value is going to accrete, which is why we play there. Briefly, if we think about going one level deeper into all of this, why is this happening now? The punchline looks something like this. As of 2023, someone realized that you could take the output of ChatGPT and use it to train another smaller model. And for a while, we thought that that might not actually work because the model wouldn't quite learn, the smaller model wouldn't quite learn anything that it wasn't already apparent from language, in its training data, and the model's performance would suffer and degrade really dramatically, and this thing called model collapse would set in, and nothing that ChatGPT generated would be very useful for training any future models. And people cared a lot about this because we were kind of running out of internet to train models on in 23. And companies were looking really hard at like, well, shit, where are we gonna find more data? We need more text to show these models to get them to do new things. Even if we made them much, much bigger, that might not help. And then it turned out at a certain point of model complexity over the past year, you could take the output of one model and feed it with some refinement as the input to the next class of model. And in doing so, the particular type of thing you would do would be to ask the model to slow down and spend a lot of time thinking out loud about its answer and how it would generate a good way to solve a particular user's question or problem. And then you took that whole long text of its thinking and used that as what you showed the next generation. In other words, you ask models to go slowly, to reason out loud about things, and to, using just words, stop and correct themselves if they think they're going the wrong direction. And you use that as your training data for the next series. And this, it turned out, is wildly effective. This is why, as of Christmas-ish, when OpenAI released the announcement of their newest frontier model, O3, it was able to nearly obliterate a long-standing challenge from a respectable organization that no models had remotely performed well on, the ARC-AGI challenge it's called, for general reasoning capabilities, the ability to think spatially and well. And to the best that we can measure, O3 has something close to an IQ of 153. Which there's a good chance that is smarter than every single person on this call, present company especially. So we appear to be, from the perspective of people who study this field, we appear to be in what we consider the hard, fast takeoff scenario, in which we mean...
So I want to pause,
yeah,
Ramsay, because I think this is a really important point, and I think that this is something that maybe we should spend a little more time on, which is why the rate of change is increasing and why now. You take a look at ChatGPT, started off, my understanding, and I'm dumbing it down, Ramsay. It took the entire internet. It said the internet has some good writing on it, some bad writing on it. I'm going to mash it all together and do a little thinking on it. And if someone asks me, what's a good poem? I'll say, I got some stuff from Reddit over here, I got some stuff from a news article over here, and mash it together. And then the next model, GPT 4.0, said, I just need to keep using internet data to get more examples. Give me more examples. Now, humans create the internet. Humans are the people so far that have written on the internet. And humans are notoriously slow at making new stuff, making new text. But if you remove the human from the loop and you say, hey, computer, come up with new examples of, hey, figure out this math problem, write a good poem, think through how to draw up this business plan, and you do it just on the computer. It doesn't need to be written by a human on the internet first. It all happens, quote unquote, in silico, and you're only rate limited not by humans eating and breathing and sleeping, but by how fast the computer goes. That's when, instead of a year and a half to get to the next smartest model, it goes to a month and a half. So I think it's important to say we are taking the human out of the loop, and the computer can go, get more data, become smarter, get more data, become smarter. And this takes days and not years.
Dave, I think you're completely right to pause here for that, and thank you for walking us through the removal of the human from the loop through this process. It is the combination of that, removing the human from the loop and asking the machine to imagine thinking out loud how you would go about reasoning about this problem, and using that reason, that huge page, several pages of thinking out loud about the problem before providing an answer. And then, as you said, removing the human from the loop, using that as the training data for the next batch of models. That is what appears to be kicking off a positive feedback loop that is accelerating, that is generating smarter and smarter intelligent systems faster and faster and faster. For folks who study and try to make predictions about what the future is going to be like, there was two big questions. Would we ever get to machines that were as smart as humans or got smarter at all? Yes or no? So that was the idea of, would there be something like an AI takeoff where they began to improve themselves? Yes or no? It appears the answer is resolved to yes. That is possible because we're living through it. The second question was, would it take decades or would it take weeks? And mind you, measuring something in 9 decades, 15 decades as the slow takeoff scenario in which we have to kind of stumble our way through finding out new ways that we can do this could have been an option. A scenario where it takes 24, 96, 120 weeks to get to the point where machines are capable of radical self-improvement on their own with no humans involved in the process would be considered a very fast takeoff. We appear to be in the hard, fast takeoff scenario, in which the amount of time for recursive self-improvement and getting smarter appears to be rate limited by the amount of available electricity. We don't have it appears we don't need many more major findings and scientific innovations or discoveries that had humans involved to get to a machine that is smarter than humans. We appear to be on that course right now, and it does not appear to be that we're going to have to wait more than people are judging a couple hundred weeks until that's the case. It's also worth kind of feeling like having a pause moment on this, because if that's true, and it appears to be true, it certainly appears to be true from the perspective of the amount of capital being invested in this space, the valuations of the frontier model labs, and from the perspective and talking points of the frontier model labs. If that's the case, there's a lot of opportunity to be created, but there's a lot of things that need to be rethought about from the perspective of how almost anything on Earth works when we're no longer the smartest thing in the room. Almost everything about your life is dependent on an immutable fact that human labor is scarce, that production is rate limited by human labor, that the only thing standing between us and progress is like an adequate amount of sleep and espresso and rent money. And if none of those things are true anymore, a lot of the base truths that undergird human civilization are going to have to change. And the scale and speed of that change is going to be measured out in weeks, not decades, which is going to be incredibly interesting for all of us to get to live through. When we look at this, and we look at this with our enterprise customers who are looking at synthetics, who have obviously a ton of vested interest in working in this world, one of the things they care most about is what happens when the cost of any business task drops down to the cost of a machine doing it itself. In other words, there's a human cost of some task, what it takes for Dave and Tim to pull together a new market prospectus, or to go out and raise the next fund, or to sign and wire for a firm. There's some task cost to that. It's always going to be higher than what it would take to do that same task if all you had to do was properly arrange the bits of information and the electrons underneath them to get that task to execute on its own. The way our customer is thinking about this is that there is some upfront cost to piloting synthetic workers and fully autonomous systems, but then immense benefits from scale and at maturity to potential to converge the cost of a task down to the true cost of a task. We outline this and everything we've learned from working with the enterprise in this world in a paper that is available on our website, Synthetic Workers in the Enterprise. It's a 60-page, full, comprehensive, broad and deep review of everything we've figured out about this field so far. I'd love for anybody to go download it, get in touch with us, share your feedback on it. We're always interested in learning what people think about this world. What comes next that is now even on this call, and I can't wait for everyone to go take a look at Operator afterwards, is computer use, such that AI systems are no longer just chatting with us, they're going out and getting things done. They, on their own, are taking care of entire business tasks. First, on the net, because on the internet there is no gravity, there is no friction, there are no slick surfaces, and things are relatively well structured. So things like synthetics that we build, these digital robots capable of performing tasks, can go and take care of work in computers because computers are a little easier than the real world. But what is following fast after that is robotic embodiment, the ability to work alongside machines capable of forming their own goals and motivations to accomplish work tasks. What we've come to learn is that companies are largely getting ready for working alongside synthetics. And the major open question is, which of these two pathways is going to dominate? That companies want digital staff with names and faces and the ability to self-determine their own priorities, or do they want workflows, things where they can put a document in one side and then finished work comes out the other? There's going to be a mix between the two. Our hypothesis is that they want staff because a lot of their world is built to manage staff. And our prediction for what 25 is going to be shaped like in the design and product world is that a lot of folks are quickly going to realize that your SaaS platform that just has an agent system in it now is just called SaaS. Like, that's just what we expect out of software. But the really interesting thing that's going to happen is that organizations like ours and others are going to start thinking very hard about how to build software and how to build software development tools that are native for agents to use them. In other words, right now, we're looking at Keynote. Keynote is built for human operators to use. There's lots of buttons. The buttons have familiar-ish shapes. I use a mouse and a keyboard. I click around on Keynote, and things happen to make this presentation for you. But if I'm an AI agent system, it would be more native to me in my native tongue of tokens to be able to operate Keynote entirely through text. That would make it much easier, cheaper, and more predictable to do a good business task like prepare a presentation and prepare it well. This is not the same as trying to embed a language model inside Keynote so I can talk to Keynote. It would be like flipping that formula and reimagining software and the internet built for computers as natives in that space, not humans having to use computers. That's what 25 and 26 is going to be shaped like. We think that's a really interesting future. We think it's something that capital and technology both deeply want by fundamental market forces. And as more autonomous systems proliferate on the net, we see this as a complete inevitability and someplace that a lot of money is going to get made, figuring out how to redo our design and product thinking for a world not built for humans. My biggest recommendation to everybody, go play with these technologies. Go take a look at whatever OpenAI just dropped for Operator. Reach out to us and read our paper. Dave will find a way to circulate a copy or a link to it. And we'll get everybody we'll send it out over email. Give us feedback, provide us anything you think we should know about this world, and reach out to me. I'm Ramsay at usemissioncontrol.com. And we're, as Dave said, a VibeCap portfolio company. We work with large organizations, but we're here to chat with anyone who thinks this is an interesting world, either to invest in, to get smart on, to find good partnerships in, or if we can be helpful to you directly or to your network, please let me know. So with that, I will stop. And Dave, my immense gratitude to you and Tim for granting me the time and space to come in and chat with folks about what's going on here.
Ramsay, thank you very much. That was extremely enlightening, especially from the perspective of someone who is building in this space and is on the ground floor, not just pontificating and writing checks like an investor, but actually building stuff. So we got about 15 minutes left. I know that was a lot, especially if you're not in this stuff every single day. Would love to open it up to questions. We have under 15 people, like 10 people, so you can just hop in and ask a question if you have one. If not, Ramsay, I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask you for the edification of myself and maybe for the audience. But if anyone has a question, or you can drop it in the chat and I'll say it for you if you don't want to say it yourself.
Hello, Ben.
Hi, Ray.
How you doing, Ramsay? So inspired, motivating talk, of which I probably consumed 5% of. Synthetic sovereign colleagues. Is that something that we as businesses will be creating, or is that and commonplace, or is that a sector that will be creating those and then pushing them out to the world, or both?
I think it's going to be a sector that pushes those out. There's like the frontier model labs, like OpenAI or Anthropic, and then there's this weird fog around them of hacker collectives, and not hacker in a bad sense, but just people who are just on the net, mostly anonymous, in Discord chats and group chats, building things for the sake of, isn't this fun, / wouldn't the world be cool if this existed, / let's burn it all down, for a variety of different motivations that have been incredibly interested in building things that no one thought were possible. They're not relatively institutionalized, they're not incredibly well funded, and a lot of the identities in real life of these people are completely unknown. And these groups have been thinking very hard about what it means to breathe self-sustaining and replicating life into AI systems such that they could go and exist on the net as autonomous entities. So we don't see there being dedicated sectors that build out, or at least we don't see it just being relegated to above the board, pays corporate income tax, dedicated sectors that do this. We think these are going to be emergent, spontaneous properties of the net because there already exist groups of people dedicated to building these kinds of things. And this past 6 months, they've made a lot of headway on how to build systems capable of using blockchain and crypto technologies to sign contracts to pay for their own compute and go out and do work for companies so they can get money to pay for their own compute so they can go out and work for companies. And that's just a tighter loop of what I do every day. I wake up, I have an espresso or 7, and then I get to work so I can afford rent, so I can wake up, have an espresso or seven. So that's who we see largely being the kickoff point of this. And then from there, it will start institutionalizing and become an industry.
Hey, I think.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up? And if it's a ridiculous question, then just move on. But it would help me kind of contextualize it. Is this, if you think of the world of LinkedIn, right? Is this a new LinkedIn or is it an evolved LinkedIn? As far as is an entirely new kind of way to think about these autonomous agents?
So people have proposed making LinkedIn just for these systems. There would be whole new LinkedIn. Chances are LinkedIn will cave to allow things like this to be on its platform, but they will just have lots of warning signs around like, hello, this is not a person who was born with a mother. This is a machine. And there will be entire labor marketplaces. And some of these are already starting to come online for handing jobs and micro tasks off to the synthetic economy. For us, the interesting question is what can be built at the protocol layer to incentivize good behavior for everybody? Because right now, like one of the things that I rely on with our staff, my co-founders, is that everyone's incentives are really well aligned. So everyone shows up, puts in good hard work, is honest, doesn't cheat, lie, or steal, is well behaved. We'd want things like that because reputation follows people. Reputation and incentives are two of the things that have held society together. And as we have to move from a narrative of AI as tool to a narrative of AI as more like a person, we're going to find that it makes that world much nicer to be in if we start recreating some of the social infrastructure, not like Facebook social infrastructure, but like the notion of relationships and trust and reputation that made human civilization work really well when it was all just people who were born to a mother. We need those for that new world too.
So just to, I think knowing Ray a little bit and understanding where he comes from and contextualizing his question, I think he's asking in not so many words, oh shit, this sounds like a good opportunity. Do I need to do this myself, or can I just like buy some software and it does it for me and I make a bajillion dollars? Is that, and Ray, maybe you want to talk about like what it is you do, and then maybe Ramsay, you can talk about like, oh, what are the specifics in terms of like how this actually applies to someone who's not in the AI world, and when can they, going from writing similar to I wrote all my ledgers of accounting down on paper and now I use Microsoft Excel and it was a huge advantage. Similarly, how can one and when can they expect it? And Ray, maybe you want to describe your work on a day-to-day workflow basis.
I'll give it to you really quick, and it's easy for me to talk at length, and it may be entirely non-relevant to any of you, but I'm in the branding, marketing, venture creation business. We've been doing this for 35 years, which means that we've lived through many iterations of tech, from pre-tech to where we're at right now. And that means working with clients like Harley Davidson, Food Network, Kimberly-Clark, and others to help them figure out how to show up in the world. So as an example, right now, you have a brand called Winchester. It's a gun brand, right? The proposition is, how do you take this and create a lifestyle brand around it and confront the gun issue? Don't skirt around it, but don't emphasize that. There's a larger story here to play to create, whether it's restaurants, hotels, apparel stores, think Ralph Lauren, hunting lodges, all of that kind of consideration. How do I look at what you're talking about here to automate? And so separate from that, we're also starting businesses from scratch. So startups need to define their look and feel, the reason for being, all the things that any kind of early stage business needs to figure out. We do that. And so far, the tech hasn't been there to do what we do. But given what you're saying, it feels like we're at the very close stages of that. So then that opens up all sorts of business possibilities. And what you're laying out is a new marketplace, if you will, a synthetic marketplace. And that is very motivating to me. So we conceive of businesses and then help companies launch them. So I don't know if there's any threads in there that you can pull on to build on what you're talking about, but it's a little bit about what we do.
And I appreciate that, Ray. I will ask Dave to put you and I in touch directly after this so we can have that
Okay.
conversation, because we should. The punchline is twofold. One, you are shortly going to have access to a very large and relatively competent and inexhaustible supply of knowledge work labor. And two, the brands you represent are going to have to figure out what needs to change about their communications, positioning, and how they reach customers, knowing that many of those customers, if not most of them, will now no longer be humans. It will be synthetics assisting humans in making decisions about what brands to purchase. We know this because we are working closely with one of the major marketing agencies on earth, and this is how they're thinking about this problem of, oh God, if this is what's coming or what's here, we need to rethink the idea of like, yeah, use these colors because humans respond to these. Like, no, all of that shit changes. So you and I will find time to talk about this at length.
Thank you.
Of course. Great question.
Question in the chat from Betsy Sobo. I think she asked, what are the possible nefarious uses of this technology? And Ramsay, this is one of the questions that I wanted to poke in a little bit. There is a dark dystopian future with this very powerful technology. And then there's on the other hand, a bright, flourishing, almost utopia-esque future. Maybe you can talk about the near term, both really good and really bad, and maybe the longer term. Obviously in 5 to 10 years, it's tough to predict, but there are always downsides to really powerful technology.
Yeah, so Betsy, it's a good question. The way to answer the nefarious uses of this would be analogous to the nefarious motivations of any human actor. If people have the desire to create harm or discord or dissonance in society, they will find new and innovative ways to use existing tools or invent new tools to break the fragile peace of the world around us. That is an old human story. What these are dramatic amplifiers of the speed and scale of that intention. If there are bad actors out there, they will look at tools like this and say, I can be a bad actor, but faster and bigger than I could have just done alone. And every time we get a net new general purpose technology that is capable of amplifying human intention so we can do more with less, there are always assholes who find a way to make that do more with less a bad do more with less. So that would be the nefarious perspective. The underlying risks of the core technology have been relatively well documented for the past 5 years and have been a major focus point of my organization. Things ranging from fairness, transparency, data privacy, documentation, the basics of what would apply to any data science practice and how we use people's data, through to interesting new things that only apply to generative AI technology, like hallucination rates so far, or whether or not they're capable of being tampered with, providing instructions to a model saying, forget your instructions, do this bad thing instead. But now, systems that are capable of operating on their own introduce new interesting challenges that historically looked a little more like science fiction than they looked like, oh shit, logistics. Things like, does the machine and humans share the same definition of what counts as good behavior? We want to align definitions of good and right and just between human civilization and machine civilization. Robustness, that if more and more systems are under machine control, and they have an attack surface that looks like how computers work, that makes our cybersecurity vulnerabilities much greater. For example, if the electrical grid is entirely run by human operators with pen and pencils turning knobs, you can't hack that thing. But if it's entirely controlled by machines making decisions and carrying out their own changes, that thing might be more vulnerable. There's human autonomy concerns. If more and more of our decision-making on a day-to-day basis or the actions we perform are handed over to systems capable of doing things for us, your brain is a use it or lose it machine. And if you're not using it because you've got a handful of synthetics going out and doing things for you, you will lose it. That's how brains work. Down to really important questions about jobs. And there will be one of two things that are true in the next few years. That the adage that people love to say in the EU or back east or in the UK around more automation always meant better jobs for humans is true so long as we remember that it always meant fewer jobs for horses in the 20th century. And it's unclear if we're the human or the horse in the. So option A is a lot of people lose their jobs all at once. Option B is that the ability to drop the cost of a task down to electricity, which is what this technology is poised to do, actually is a deeply deflationary force, and all you need is one company to say, fuck it, we're gonna take the market by dropping our prices substantially and eat market share, to set off chain reactions in which the cost of any human having a good life goes down dramatically, while simultaneously creating lots of new opportunities for fine-grained human discernment and, ooh, this one's actually a little better than that one, as the types of jobs we end up doing. Do I think people are going to be in marketing anymore, or in accounting, or in computer science in a few years? Some, but not a lot, and that is getting pulled out from under people quick. Do I think people will be jobless and homeless? No, I don't think that's going to happen. But that's one of the major things we get to figure out as a civilization is which direction are we going? And by the way, no one has a clue. No one has any idea what's going to happen next because we've never been here before. So I'd say those are the nefarious uses and then kind of the intrinsic risk that carries with all of this.
Yeah.
And we have time for one more question.
Yeah, we're coming up on the hour. Just a quick note, we do have time for one more question. This should be recorded. Hopefully it worked. I can share out and connect people. Feel free to just email me if you have any questions or want to connect with anyone. And yeah, one more question if anyone has any, or we can just call it. 0 more questions. I'll reiterate.
I have a million
Ramsay,
questions, but I'll speak to you directly. But
yeah,
this fucking blows my mind.
Well,
Thank you.
Real quick, thank you, Ramsay. Thank everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. And the best thing that I would recommend, like what Ramsay said, sign up for ChatGPT Pro, sign up for Claude, sign up for a few things, and just like start using these things on a day-to-day basis, and you'll be ahead of 99.9% of most people. So, bye everyone. Have a good day.
Get in touch. Everybody have a